What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Timeout with Sko. I have a special guest today, Coach Ryan Coleman. Ryan is the current coach at Shalhevet High School for the girls and the boys. He was a former coach at Calabasas High School for the JV team, as well as an assistant varsity coach. He has won 9 league titles and has also been a 5-time Coach of the Year. So I just wanted to thank you for coming and joining me today.
Thank you. That was the nicest introduction I've had in a long time.
I'm trying. I'm working on it. So talk to me a little bit just like about your journey and kind of what got you into coaching.
Yeah. Played basketball at Calabasas 4 years on the varsity level and then got to play in college at Sacramento State University. Got away from basketball after college, tried to become a real working person. The behind the desk thing wasn't for me. Tried several different things, including my family's real estate business, and really wanted to get back to what I love to do, which was coach and work with kids. So I was in my early 30s, going through some tough times in my life, and told my folks that that's what I wanted to do. My dad is very old school. He's from the Midwest, very successful at what he does. And he told me that while that was nice, I was going to need another way to supplement my income. There's no way you can make it as a coach or a trainer. And I kind of used those words, not to motivate me, but, I thought about what he said and kind of wanted to prove him wrong and got into coaching and training. Worked at Calabasas High School, as you mentioned, and then I was fortunate enough to become the head coach at Shalhevet High School, and currently in my 11th year coaching the boys and 6th year coaching the girls.
Nice. Tell me about your transition from Calabasas to Shalhevet. Obviously, you were head coach for the JV level and an assistant at the varsity level, and then you took on this role at Shalhevet as a head coach. When you started, were you coaching both the women and the men? And what was that transition like for you to sort of now head and lead, a program?
Right. I think that a lot of people have these thoughts of how great it would be to be a head coach of a program. And while I was coaching JV and also working with the varsity at Calabasas, I really had no idea what went into being a head coach, all the things that take place off the floor, in addition to all your responsibilities on the floor. And I've always thought that as I was working with Calabasas, there were certain things that I really loved that they did that I thought, if I was ever a head coach, I'm going to take this with me. And then there were things that I thought to myself I would do differently. And so I tried to incorporate all those things as I became a head coach at Shalhevet, and then throw in religion and everything else that goes into play working at an Orthodox Jewish school. And that was quite the juggling act and a learning experience. And 11 years later, I still feel like I'm learning about the culture. But it's been nothing but amazing. When I first started there, it was just the boys, coaching just the boys. And then I had a group of girls who, going into their senior year, were really interested in me coaching them as well. I kind of thought it would be a 1-year deal, and here I am 6 years later wondering how the heck I'm still doing both.
So along the way, obviously you start winning a little bit. What did you figure out in that process for you and, going from a different school, right, where Calabasas is a public school and it's way easier to get kids on the team, whereas now you're at a smaller school, religious school, where kids not everybody's, allowed to come to the school. You have to be sort of religious and of that background. How are you able to find success within that?
Well, it's definitely been a learning curve. We don't get the type of athletes or have the God-given ability to just walk up to the rim and dunk or anything like that. So I think that teaching the fundamentals of the game and teaching a certain way to play the game of basketball has been something that I've really keyed on. In the boys' game specifically, we're almost always outmatched in terms of height and athleticism. But there was a period of time where we were out rebounding teams 90% of the time. And I think a lot of that comes from heart, and also it comes from their community and kind of the way the kids are raised. I think it's very easy for me to be able to communicate something that I would like to see on the court to these kids, and they're so attentive. They look you in the eye, they're very respectful, and they really want to carry out and make you feel proud of what you're doing with them. So I think I've been fortunate in being thrust into this community because of their background. They kind of make me look smarter than I am, certainly on the sideline.
If there was one quality or trait or characteristic that you could deem was most important for a player to have on a team that you're coaching, what would that be and why?
Probably communication on several different levels. I really value communicating with my players and trying to have some sort of rapport with them beyond the game of basketball. I don't know if somebody's having trouble in a class, having trouble with their friends, something's happening at home. So we communicate a ton off the floor. And then on the floor, basketball to me is a little bit of a choreographed dance. And if you don't know what the person's doing next to you and why they're doing it, or did they just have a misstep and now you need to help them, I think that, communication is probably number one for us. And communicating, teenagers nowadays, and in particular, communicate via text. I tell them all the time, we don't have our phones on the floor. So as much as you would love to send them a quick Snapchat of what you're doing, we got to be able to open our mouth and let them know that you need help.
Right. Yeah, I think communication is huge. Like I always say, communicate early and often. And I think it's also important at that high school level for players to be able to communicate, with the coach as well, to be able to say, hey, I can't make it to practice, or hey, I'm sick, or whatever it is. I think that's an important skill for players to have, not just like through sport, but also to be taught that like off court as well, because everything we do is communication based.
Absolutely.
Verbal, nonverbal, we're communicating all the time with people.
I mean, I have 3 teenage kids right now. And while certainly 2 of them don't communicate a ton with me, unless they need money, I see that, and I see that the way that they communicate with their friends is different than they communicate with their parents or their teachers or administration. So I guess I'm privy to it at home, and I like to pass that along to my kids, my children at home. But also I know as a coach, as an administrator at a school, they're not as open to communicating with me as they are to people who they're more comfortable with. So that's where I think that rapport off the floor becomes really important.
Yeah, talk about, you mentioned having 3 kids. Obviously, like I know your son, he plays high school basketball currently. Talk about that parent coach sort of dynamic and how like you try to remain his parent, and like what advice could you give other parents who, do both as well, but like that should maintain their relationship with their kid first.
Right. So my son is a high level player. I think that a lot of the way that he sees the game and plays the game, I'm hoping comes from what I've taught him growing up. I know that at some point that I needed to let him grow a little bit without me around. So that's why I don't coach him in high school, but also we don't talk a ton about his basketball. I'm trying to let him learn on his own, and I trust the coaches that he works with regularly. As far as being a parent in the stands, it's tough. I'm not going to lie. I try to sit there with my mouth shut as much as I can. I actually moved from sitting on the floor to way up in the bleachers so that if I have something to say, I can't say it. But I think it's great. His passion for the game is second to none. And I know that if in a time of need, if he really needs help or advice, he's going to come to me. He has. But for the most part, I try to be as hands-off as possible and let him grow as a young man.
Yeah, I love that. And I think parents can embody that more. I hear a lot of times from clients or players that I've worked with, they get in the car and that car ride is just brutal, and they don't look forward to it. And, I've seen it in a lot of ways impact that sort of parent-child relationship. And I think that there's a lot of value to being able to separate both and letting the kid kind of come to you.
Well, I know as a coach, certainly what I would like for my parents of the players. So if I wasn't replicating that in the stands, I don't know how I could go on. I would be a total hypocrite if I was the one yelling in the stands, shoot the ball, pass it to my son. So I try to make sure that I embody what I would like my parents to do of the players that I coach.
Sure. Now, speaking of your son, I've seen him play before. He has extremely high skill level. Talk about for you within your practices, how do you manage and balance skill development but also team concepts? Because I think both are really important, and obviously it's up to the coach to determine how much of each is needed. But what does that look like for you within your program? Is that different from girls to boys? And just sort of how do you implement that?
Right. So at Shalhevet, at least, our practices we're 90 minutes on and off the floor. Sometimes that includes film, 15 minutes of film. I really think that, this is a little bit off topic, but the attention span of a 15-year-old boy or 15-year-old girl there's a reason why classes aren't 3 hours long. So we try to get everything done in a really timely manner. That being said, we do spend time every single day on skill work. That's whether it be at the beginning of practice, intermittent in between learning something and then go to skill work and then go back to learning something, to make sure that we're working on skills that generally translate to what we're doing on the court that day. So maybe we're working on tempo things. So our rebounding drill with catching the ball and throwing a quick outlet is something that we work on at the beginning of practice, so that later when we're working on a tempo drill or concept, that the kids already have that kind of ingrained in their brain.
And for the type of kids and players that you have at Shalhevet, right, I think it's fair to say that all of them probably aren't going to be going and playing professionally afterwards. So for you as a coach, understanding that, understanding obviously you want to create a winning culture, which you have, what things are important for you to sort of mentor and teach or lead the kids with that they can take from their time in the program and now use that after they're done playing?
Okay, first of all, I feel like I have it easy compared to some people because I don't have parents and kids saying, how are you going to get my son to Duke and North Carolina?
Right, good point.
Right, so that makes my life a little bit easier in that regard. But I would say this, what I really try to do with the kids that I coach is teach them all the different parallels between basketball and life, right? In basketball, you got 5 guys or 5 girls on the floor with you. You may not like every one of those people. I know for myself, when I sat down in a real estate office, there were 3 or 4 people in that office that I had to work with every single day. I didn't care for them. So you don't always get to choose your teammates, like you don't get to choose your coworkers or your family even. You don't get to choose these people, but how are we going to be a cohesive unit to make it work? What does that mean? Spending more time off the floor so that we're better on the floor together? Does that mean that we need to put ourselves in high intensity situations off the floor as well? Do we need to go do an escape room and see who panics and who comes to the forefront and becomes a leader? So those are things that I really try to teach, the parallels between basketball and life.
And what would you say the number one ingredient is for your success?
I think attention to detail. I think, I'm sitting across from somebody who, in terms of training, I see the detail that you put into it. I'm very detail oriented when it comes to basketball. If that means it's a game plan, a scouting report, the way that we run a certain play, again, like a choreographed dance, it's got to be synchronized. We have to have gone over it time and time again, and making sure that people understand from day one when you come to play basketball at Shalhevet, that is your most difficult class. We're putting time in on the court. You're putting time in off the floor. and you're studying. So I think the attention to detail, while it sounds simple, it really does take a lot of time and sacrifice in order to do that correctly.
I can definitely attest to that. I think it's way easier to be less detailed and to just kind of do things and say that we did them than it is for every possession we're stopping something, we're correcting something, we're teaching, we're talking about this, we're explaining the why. And I think that's true coaching. And I think that I'd like to see that more in our game today, where we're really holding kids accountable to the things that are going to help us be successful in the long run. And talking about just success in general, talk about how you've kind of developed a staff around sort of the things that are most important to your program. And how would if I were to start my own, right, or coach somewhere, what would be some advice or feedback that you could give to me in sort of organizing people that you really trust and that you really think are here to also help the kids?
Sure. I think that, I've had best friends on my staff, and I've had people that I haven't known at all. I think that part of it is having people that challenge you as a coach, not having a yes man or yes woman next to you who's agreeing with everything you say, feeling comfortable in delegating some of the tasks, whether they be on court or off court scenarios, to certain coaches. I think that's super important. For me, although I still feel like I'm in my 20s, I'm clearly not. I think that having somebody young who hasn't been a head coach yet, who's eager to be a head coach, having somebody like that on your staff, and letting them grow and feeling comfortable in letting them grow while not having it feel to you like they're taking over the team. I've been blessed to have several coaches who've coached, been an assistant with me, that are now head coaches in other places. And some people ask, all the time, why is your assistant leaving? Aren't you upset? But you got to feel great when you have an assistant coach, then go become a head coach. So I think having younger people around me that want to be a head coach, I would say that is something that I feel like is almost essential to me at this point.
And what was your sort of biggest sort of concern or worry, or sort of doubt that you had going from Calabasas to now Shalhevet and sort of running the program there?
You're not talking about the traffic, the drive. We're talking about the actual.
We're talking about the actual basketball.
I would say this. At Shalhevet, I didn't feel like there was pressure to win from the administration or from anybody at the school. That pressure came from me, and I wanted to win so quickly. I think that I forgot to take some of the steps that were necessary. So that part of the transition for me was tough because of the pressures that I was putting on myself, and it not coming from any sort of outside sources.
Well, it seems like the pressure has been something that's been good for you. You've obviously won a lot while you've been there. What's been your greatest moment or achievement since you've taken on that role?
I would say that, on my phone, the day that we won the state championship, I changed the picture of me and my kids to the picture of the championship trophy. I don't think my kids liked that, but I told them that was my greatest accomplishment. I say it somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but to win the girls' state championship a year after losing the state championship and getting back there and playing against the same team that we had lost to, and we were a division higher at the time, it felt like a movie. I told the girls we were leaving the locker room after we lost in 2022 in Sacramento, and they were young-ish and naive and said, "Oh, don't worry, we're going to get back here next year." And I remember being so angry and telling them, "We're not getting back here next year. We're never getting back here. This is like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." So for them to prove me wrong and get back there and end up winning the state championship, I don't know that there could be anything better. But if there is, I'm ready for it.
And then you're going to put that as your new screensaver.
If we win another one, I would obviously like to do it on the boys' side, but just the opportunity to coach at that type of level in that atmosphere is phenomenal.
Yeah, that's why we do it. So speaking of the boys and girls side, and I hate to put you on the spot, do you have a preference? And what have you noticed the differences are between coaching on the girls' side and boys' side?
Sure. Preference, to be 100% transparent, if I did not coach boys, I don't think I would coach girls. I don't know if that makes me prefer the boys, but it's totally they're like two different sports. And I practice back to back, and there's 5 or 6 times in a girls' practice that I laugh. I never crack a smile in a boys' practice. I don't have fun coaching the boys like I do with the girls. Sometimes they say things or do things that just make me crack up, and if you're not laughing, you're going to go crazy. I'm not saying that our girls program is a joke. Clearly, we're not, and we've had a great run and continue to grow. But I have 2 teenage girls at home, and the girls, I relate to them so well for some reason. They teach me new vocabulary every day and words that I had no idea what they were.
You're staying cool and hip.
Yes, that's my vibe because I have good aura, right?
I feel that.
So these are things that I hear from them every day. I do love coaching boys. That was my passion and where it started. But there's something about the game of girls basketball where I feel like I can really impact it by teaching them a little bit more than they were given at a young age. I think that the girls in general probably haven't been given as much instruction or good coaching at a young age. So when they get to the high school level, some of the things that I would take for granted, they just haven't been taught. So I really enjoy getting back to coaching the fundamentals and the basics. And I get to do that with them. And I know that was the most all over the place answer in the world.
No, that's great. I played with all boys growing up. I played for, I don't know if you know him. His name is Dave Miller. And Dave
Madman Miller?
Yes, that was my AAU coach.
Wow.
The nickname says it all.
That's his actual name in my phone. Like if we looked at it, it would say Dave Madman Miller.
Yeah. Shout out Dave, first of all. But like he was he taught me so much. And like in that time, I think I was, I don't know, maybe 11, 12, something like that. And it was sort of like that last year that I was playing like on the boys' side. Like it was time when I got to high school to play with girls, And one of the things that he would always say to me was like, I always got to stop and show you everything. Like for the guys, I just say it and they can get it done. But for you, I have to stop and show you. So here's how you do it. Like he'd always kind of poke fun at me for that. What do you think the differences are like that you've noticed from the girl side and the boy side in regards to how you coach them?
Well, I think I have to be careful as a 45-year-old man, the way I speak to girls, certainly. My daughter, who's a senior in high school right now, I wouldn't want her coach speaking to her the way that sometimes I catch myself, like I'm about to say something like I would normally say to a boy, and I got to stop and, whoa, I can't do that. So I think that's one thing, is making sure that the tone of my voice and the way that I'm trying to teach is completely different. Like you said, I may have to show them something that's like a super simple, or I take for granted it's super simple. We need to catch the ball and reverse pivot before we throw this pass. Well, if I say that and somebody's looking at me with that who smelled fart face because they don't know what a reverse pivot is, I got to go stop and show them what the reverse pivot looks like. Not to say that every boy I coach knows what a reverse pivot is either, but I think that just that the details stuff is super important. I think that also You and I were talking before, sometimes girls are a little bit more robotic to a fault. If I'm telling you that you got to be on the wing for this play, but you're being overplayed on the wing, well, let's just cut back door. To me, that's like, I'm just going to go cut back door. But to them, no, you told me to be on the wing, right? A boy wants to be combative. Why would I be on the wing? I don't want to be on the wing anyway. I'm a guard. I'm a wing player, whatever it is. So I think that the girls are a little bit more cerebral in what you're saying. So you might have to also tell them there's a little bit more freedom in this than just be on the wing.
Yeah, I feel like the boys' side, you have to like reel them back, and the girls' side, you gotta like let them go.
Totally.
Sorry. Something else that comes to mind is, and that we talked about earlier today, was just film. And we talked a little bit about, you mentioned how, you use film to really help you sort of dive into the game and study it. How do you implement that, like, within your team setting? And, like, is that something you require for your players? Are you cutting and clipping things for them to watch? You mentioned, like, how that's a part of your practices. Like, what does that look like for you on an everyday basis?
Sure. So my wife jokes about how she goes to sleep at night to the sound of squeaking shoes because I'm generally watching film still in bed while she's sleeping. I'm definitely a film junkie. I've learned that my film sessions with the kids need to be short and concise. So anything that we're doing film-wise, I've cut up beforehand. Also, I think that if I were to tell a kid on my team, boy or girl, you need to watch this game, they're going to watch the game differently than I'm going to watch the game. They're going to watch the game and wonder, hey, how come he didn't pass me the ball on this play? I was wide open. Where I'm thinking to myself, we're not looking at that. We're trying to look at how come you didn't make the extra slide on defense? We've talked about this 15 times and you didn't box out. And so I think that making sure that everything is concise for them and then going over it, whether it be individuals will receive certain edits. And then as a team, we want to look at more, why isn't everybody on the same page? Or why is everyone on the same page? I think so much of film can be negative and kind of picking on these kids, and we're not praising them enough. So I think that that's important too, making sure that we're mixing in, hey, this was great ball movement. This was great rotation on defense. It's a lot like if you go to a restaurant. I use this example all the time, but if your food's not warm, you got to give them a compliment, tell them what's wrong, and then give them a compliment on the way out. Hey, everything's great. Would you mind heating up my fries a little bit more? Thank you so much. Really doing a great job. The little sandwich, everything. So I try to do that in film as well.
One of the things that when I worked for the Lakers that was huge was obviously film. And that was my role, essentially. We would cut and clip 5 games out for whatever team that we would play. And then we would also, players would have certain requests of types of films that they wanted to watch and that they wanted to see. And, that was the first time, in college, we did watch film. We watched it more so as a team base. But that was the first time where I actually realized, kind of to your point, that film can be a way for us solely just to learn and not to pick on, and if you can be able to understand what you're watching and what you're trying to improve on, all the answers are right there for you.
Right.
And so, I love that you say that. I think that's so valuable.
I think too that, I mess up every cliche, but I believe there's some cliche like the film don't lie.
Mm-hmm.
Is that okay? I think that a lot of players think that they play harder than they do or smarter than they do, and then they watch it on film and it's like they're having an outer body experience. That was me? I don't remember that. Well, yeah, that was why when I called you over to the sideline and asked you what the heck was going on. So I think that there's a ton of value in watching with them.
Other than film, right, you talked about, for the most part, specifically on the boys' side, that most of the team that you play, you're undersized. What other sorts of things do you do to prepare your team to play against competition that may be faster, stronger, taller than, the kids on your team?
Right. So, You can bring people into practice, which we do. Our boys are currently getting ready to go to New York for their national championships. So this past week we had a FIBA 3-on-3 team come in and practice against us, not only to teach us the 3-on-3, the 3x3 FIBA game, but to really bang against us. They were big, strong men, and that's one way to do it. We have alumni who are always around. Welcome any alumni to come beat up on our current players. I would say the coaches, but for me, I'm certainly not banging with them anymore. So I think that it's important though. Sometimes you do 6-on-5 or 7-on-5. Anything to make the team feel like they're at a disadvantage, because they're going to be at a disadvantage as soon as the game starts.
And what is something that you do in practice that you're doing every single day? It's almost like a daily vitamin for your group, because we all have them as coaches.
So almost every day for me is some sort of I'm a firm believer that basketball IQ can be built, that you're not just born with basketball IQ. So we do read and react, whether it be the offense has an advantage or the defense has an advantage that's been created, and we mimic that the advantage has already been created, and then decision making off of that, and as it relates to our personnel as well. So maybe you're not helping off of the shooter on the weak side of the floor, even because that was part of the scouting report. So we'll try to incorporate things like that, give them more than just you're playing 4-on-3 in a small window of time. But I think that it all incorporates trying to build their basketball IQ, and that's every day for us.
Do you think basketball IQ is something learned, or do you think it's essentially a sequence of events that occurs over and over again, that if you can understand what those reads are, you're essentially making the same decisions based upon the reads?
I think that it's probably a combination of those. I think it's also kind of, what are you watching at home? Are you just watching an NBA game and thinking, Steph Curry's a great shooter, right? Are you watching the way he moves without the ball, or the way he sets screens for his teammates? Because that to me shows that there's more than just you're more than just watching a guy shoot, right? It's how you watch, it's how you study, it's who you study, right? All those things are important. And then beyond just what you're watching and doing off the court, like you said, I think that you obviously hopefully you learn from both mistakes and success on the floor. So while a read may be there consistently for you one night, it may not be there for you another night. What happens when that read's not there? Well, I gotta learn what's gonna work next. And now I've got that into my brain too. So I've experienced the way they defend me one way, the way they defend me another way, or the way they're defending our teammates. And those are all put into your little basketball brain, and hopefully you're able to hit the recall button really quick, because you don't have a lot of time to recognize that in the game of basketball until the game slows down for you at some point, hopefully.
Right. And outside of like just coaching, right, the X's and O's and doing the film and obviously scouting and all of those things, how do you develop like meaningful relationships with your players so that the things that you're asking them to do, there's not this sort of like resistance or headbutting or friction? And I also say that, granted, I understand all of these kids are between the age of 14 and 18, so that's going to occur to some level. But, how for you do you sort of build those meaningful relationships with your players? Is there something specific that you do?
TikTok. I
should have known.
Pretty much TikTok king at this point.
You're doing the dances and stuff?
I'll do whatever they want me to do. I don't care. I feel like I'm a walking meme on campus at this point, but I'll do whatever I can to make sure that they know that I'm in their corner. Sometimes it's something as simple as like a kid's having just bombed a test, right? And I'm on campus a lot during the day. I don't need to be on campus. I'm just a basketball coach at this point. I don't do anything else. I help out here and there with like admissions, but I'm really on campus all day to build my relationships with players. So sometimes that's sitting down with them and having lunch. Other times it's whether it be getting to work with them in the gym or something like as nominal as like a simple Snapchat or TikTok. If that's what they want me to do, I'm going to do it.
Are you Snapchatting them back and forth too?
Yeah.
I got to get on that. I'm not a Snapchatter.
I'm a firm believer right now that kids, especially teenagers, they really express themselves through social media, and not to pry in any of their business. And I will never be social media friends with anybody who doesn't want to be. They always have to request me. Fine. But I want to know what's going on in their life. And a lot of times it's as simple as their Instagram story or something quick to let me know, like, oh, shoot, or oh, great, something happened. We want to celebrate this. I need to be able to say, hey, I didn't know it was your brother's birthday. That's great. What'd you guys do? Just little things here and there to let them know that you're interested in something more than just basketball.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that making people feel comfortable, cared about, you're going to always get more from them. And it goes a long way. And I always say basketball is the tool, right? It's realistically, like, we're all here because we enjoy, like, getting to know people. We enjoy helping them, and basketball is just kind of the avenue that we find our way to do that. So,
Absolutely.
I completely agree. As far as outside of building the relationships, now kind of talk to me more about like your processes within scouting, within like not just scouting like for an upcoming game, but also like what are you doing as far as game day sort of shoot around stuff? Like what does that look like for you, like walkthroughs, stuff like that?
Sure. So we don't do an abundance of scouting and preparation for every game. There will be a short message sometimes on player tendencies, what our focus is going to be for any given game. But we don't do a ton of scouting for each game. I feel like there's a burnout factor in high school, in particular with teenagers. And things are way different at Shellhead. I think that if I was somewhere else, it may be different, and I would put together sort of like a different blueprint. But our kids go to school from 8 o'clock till 4:30 every day.
It's a long day.
And they have they take Judaic classes and general studies classes. They're taking 9 classes. Their load is a lot. So we only practice 3 times a week.
Wow. And that's during season too?
During season, like if we have 3 games in a week, we're likely not practicing at all.
Wow.
Yeah, during season though, like if we have no games in a week, the most we'll practice is 3 days. And that's part of what I was talking about earlier, was being really concise with our 90 minutes again on the floor. So we're not on the floor for more than 4 hours a week. We're getting it done, and we have to be very specific about what we're working on. But to answer your question about the game day prep, a lot of times we don't do shoot around. Also, our gym is used for everything. Our school is literally built around our gym, and it's a multi-purpose facility. So we may not have our gym. We may not be able to shoot around or walk through that day, which makes sometimes film or even just getting to a gym earlier and having a little bit of prep time in the locker room that much more important. These are things that make coaching at Shellhead a little bit more challenging, but they're certainly doable. I don't think that there's a right or wrong way to do anything, so we got to be creative.
To be able to win the state championship and only be practicing 3 times a week is pretty awesome. And it shows like you guys are making really good use of your time.
Yeah, we have to.
Yeah. You talked about challenges. What has been one of your biggest challenges outside of what you just mentioned as far as practice time that you faced as a coach? It can be at Shellhead, it could be travel ball, it could be Calabasas, but what's been the biggest challenge for you?
That's a tough question. I would say one of the toughest things is is trying to, I'll talk from a coach's standpoint, but trying to get across to parents that we have their kids' best interest at heart. And while they may feel differently sometimes during games or after games, that trying to make sure that we're on the same page as far as coaches and parents and relaying that same message. And like you talked about, that car ride home that some kids really dread. Parents have a huge effect on that. I think that there's, it's similar to if you're fighting with somebody. In my relationship, at least, I try to do the 24-hour rule. Like if it's that important 24 hours later, let's sit down and address it. I'm similar basketball-wise. We don't need to sit in the locker room after the game and undress every little thing that happened and harp on the kids because it just happened. So let's let it sit for a little while. So as parents, I think that we could do a better job, me included as a parent. I'm driving home from a game, and while I would love to blame so-and-so coach or so-and-so kid, what are we teaching our kids if that's what we're doing? So I think that a lot of my relationships with parents right now are great because I have 3 teenage kids. So I think that for me, it's been a little bit of a challenge as far as what your question was. It's challenging to have good relationships with the parents and still draw a line of this is when we need to be a parent and really harp on our kids, and this is where we need to let them grow a little bit.
How do you manage those player and parent expectations? Is it just conversations? Are you having meetings before a season? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I think that that's really important. That's you got to let people know kind of where they stand because the not knowing builds anxiety. It builds a lot of what ifs. So letting kids know kind of what their role is when the season starts, and not that they're just pigeonholed into that role. Injuries, sickness, play, practice, performing well in practice may elevate them, but letting them know kind of what to expect to start, I think, is very important. I generally don't talk to parents about this. I think it's important that the kids themselves could then communicate with their parents. I know that's like crazy. You got to talk to your parent about it. But I think that if the parents and kids knew what to expect going in, I don't think that it would be that much of a surprise if then their son or daughter did not play that much. And I think that helps kind of diffuse some of those conflicts. In particular, I'm sure you've been part of one of these, the right after the game conflict, how come so-and-so didn't play? What are you doing?
Right.
So if they kind of know what to expect, I think that's a good way to navigate that.
And how do you manage, within the team setting? How are you managing, adversity, conflict? How are you managing, team expectations and behavior and things like that?
You got to have great leaders on the team. You got to identify 1 or 2 or 3, whatever it be, captains that understand that they're an extension of the coach. And you've got to have a great relationship with those captains, and hopefully those captains kind of carry out your message and your vision as a coach. I think it's a lot easier for kids to listen to their peers than it is an adult. So I'm very big on those people that I choose to lead the team. And generally those people make it very evident. I don't feel like it's ever a tough choice for me to identify who the captains are. I think that those people kind of put themselves forward by the way that they act, by the way that they conduct themselves on and off the floor. So that's essential to me.
I saw this post on Instagram, and it was the best teams are the teams where the coach doesn't have to tell the player to work harder. One of the players is telling another player, this isn't how we do things here. And that's so, I think that every good team that I've ever been a part of, we've had that person that's kept everybody else in check. And I think that's so invaluable to team culture, to success, to all of it.
I would say this happened just a few weeks ago. Our volleyball coach sat and watched one of our practices. and she's sat in on several practices because she's enamored with how hard we practice and the structure of it. And she thought that one of our players who was injured, who's a captain, was a coach. Like she doesn't know our team that well, but she actually thought that he was a coach because of the way he was really inserting himself. And he speaks like a coach, and it's great. That I thought that was an ultimate compliment. When I told him that, his comment back to me was like, "Well, I guess it's time to shave," but
Oh my God.
missed the point.
Got it. Yeah. As far as off season, what does that look like for your team? Obviously, I know, like you said, you guys have sort of a rigorous school schedule. Obviously, I know the gym's constantly being like occupied and used. What are you guys doing off season?
Well, I mean, I know this is strange, but for us, and it's March 16th right now, we're not in off season yet for our boys. Like our postseason national tournament is a week and a half from now. So our off season doesn't even start until the first week in April on the boys' side, which is different, obviously, than most schools. So we'll take a month or so off. Some of the kids will play travel ball, although it's very difficult for Orthodox Jewish kids not being able to really play on Friday night or Saturday. And then we'll get ready and play some summer basketball. Our off season is very short. It's really a month or so, which I think is important that the kids get away from the court. Certainly that they don't hear my voice for a month or so, because I know that gets tiresome. So it's short. Our off-season workouts are skill-based, not a lot of competing against each other, a lot of trying to identify what certain players need to get better at. We have postseason meetings, try to identify what do I need to get better at in order to become a better basketball player to help our team win or help myself get to the next level, whatever that may be, and then hopefully work on those skills in the off-season.
Nice. Last question that I have for you. Obviously, you know Drew Hanlon. He comes to your gym and spends 6 weeks or so with his guys there over the summer. So you've had the opportunity to get to watch and see workouts. Your son's got to kind of be a part of that as well. What's been the biggest takeaway that you've been able to see, like watching those guys work? What have you been able to take that you've been able to implement, like with your own team? And like, what's been the biggest value you've gotten from that?
I think that, first of all, Drew's one of the best trainers, obviously, in the world and become such a good friend of mine. I'm super grateful to have him be a part of our life. But to watch how basic some of his workouts are and those fundamentals that you and I probably value more than a lot of people, and, to see the way that they ramp up their workouts too throughout the summer, I think is super important. So I'd say number one would be the fundamental stuff that they do every single workout. And then it's interesting to see, certain guys are making long run in the playoffs. So their off season is a lot shorter. Other guys are done middle of April and they want to get in the gym right away. So, 3-4 weeks off, and then coming into the gym. So he really takes what their season load looked like into consideration. And each guy that comes in, their workout looks different. Although there may be similar type of players, or they're working out together, their workout may be tailored completely differently based on where they're at in the off season, which I think is something that I've definitely taken. Like I said, we have a super short off season, so we don't do a lot of live basketball afterwards. I don't think that that's necessary in particular right away. So I think Drew does a great job of that. And then, towards the end of the summer, before those guys leave for training camp, their workouts are really ramped up and there's a lot more live and competitive things going on in their workout.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been to a number of his workouts over the summer, and it's cool to see just like how intricate they are for each player, but also like to your point, even at the highest level, they're working on the same exact things that high school players, middle school players are working on. And I saw this, I think Clay said it when they were asking him about, Steve Kerr and his coaching. And, he was like, I couldn't wait to get out of college because I thought I was going to be doing all of these different things and these cool workouts. And he was like, and I'm still doing jump stops and pivots and step throughs. And like, it's the same thing everywhere. You're just continuing to refine and grow and, just gain more confidence doing those things, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, like I said earlier, it's kind of the way that we watch and interpret basketball too. Are you watching the big nasty crossover into the step back? Yeah, that's great. But what did he or she do beforehand in order to put themselves in that position? There's so much more than just what ends up in a little 3-second clip that that we're also obsessed with seeing.
Yeah.
So everything that else goes into that is super important, and people need to learn what the process looks like. Be patient.
Yeah. Well, before you go, I'll give you an opportunity. I'm kind of putting you on the spot. You can ask me a question, and free game.
Oh, this is easy for me.
Oh God, I don't know if I want to hear this. You knew that answer too quickly.
Oh, yeah, very easy for me. You know the game as well as anybody, in terms of like not only the game of basketball on the floor, but really understanding what goes into it off the court in order to make individual players and teams successful. So when are you getting back into coaching, and your preference also, would that be to coach women or men?
So, coaching is something like super special to me. And I think at this point it would take a good situation. I'm a little bit pickier, I think, than I was when I was, 25 years old about where I was going and what situation that looked like. But I could see in the near future, I don't want to pin myself down to a specific date, but I could see within the next couple years, I've had opportunities, but it hasn't made sense. And so I'm kind of waiting for one to make sense for me. But like coaching is what lights me up. It's what I enjoy and love. And, I'm not necessarily coaching a team right now, but I work with kids every day, within the game of basketball. And I am having the opportunities to coach. And I see where I find that enjoyment. And it is being on the floor, and it is being able to, teach concepts, I think. I think for me personally, the training portion has become a tool that I can use within coaching, but I don't see myself having as much enjoyment teaching somebody how to do an anchor step, right? Like, I want to teach people how to play the game of basketball better.
Yeah, you're born to do it.
Well,
boys or girls, and why?
When I first started, I would say boys, because I felt as though like the skill level was higher and it kept me more mentally engaged. As I've like been in the game, girls. I think they listen more. For some reason, like there's like a level of like pureness as like a middle school girl, and like a high school kid that's kind of figuring themselves out and just trying to see like where they fall, and they're building their confidence. And there's something special about like I was also a player, so being able to have an impact on like the game directly, like that, matches with what I've done, I think is really cool. So I could definitely see myself in the near future like coaching a girls team.
I feel like you're ready to make an announcement right now.
Oh my God, don't put the pressure on me. But thank you so much for coming and joining me. I appreciate all of your answers and just the thoughtfulness that you gave to them. And I think that you shared a lot of valuable information that other coaches, other players can learn from. So before you leave, if you could just say in the camera, like for anybody that's interested in learning more about you, learning more about the Shalhevet program, where they can find more information.
Wow. If you want to learn about me and my family, you can follow me on Instagram, which is strange. I'm not really big on being any sort of influencer or anything like that. If you want to follow Shalhevet BB, that's where you'll find everything that we do as a team.
Thank you so much, Coach. I really appreciate you stopping by.
Appreciate you having me.